Marcus Johnson stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the collar of his plain white shirt. He wasn't used to dressing down. For years he'd worn tailored suits, polished shoes, and a Rolex that screamed success. But today, he needed to blend in. He needed to see the truth for himself. The complaints had been piling up, black customers ignored, followed by security, treated like they didn't belong. And this was happening in his stores, the empire he'd built from nothing, the empire that was supposed to stand for equality and opportunity. He grabbed a worn-out jacket from the closet, one he hadn't touched in years, and slipped it on. The fabric felt foreign against his skin, like he was stepping into someone else's life. But that was the point. He wasn't Marcus Johnson, the CEO, today. He was just another black man walking into a store, hoping to be treated with respect. The drive to the store was quiet. Marcus replayed the memories in his head, the times he'd been overlooked for promotions, the whispers behind his back, the way people's tones changed when they realized he was in charge. He'd fought so hard to get here, but now he wondered if anything had really changed. When he walked into the store, the first thing he noticed was the way the employees looked at him. Not with the usual smiles and greetings they gave white customers, but with suspicion. A security guard near the entrance shifted his weight, his eyes following Marcus as he browsed the aisles. Marcus picked up a shirt, pretending to examine it, but his focus was on the employees. A young white woman, Sarah, was helping an older white couple, laughing at their jokes and guiding them through the store. Marcus approached her, holding up the shirt. "Excuse me, could you tell me if this comes in a larger size?" Sarah glanced at him, her smile fading. I'm busy right now. Someone else can help you." Marcus paused, taken aback. "It'll just take a second," she sighed, clearly annoyed. "Look, I don't have time for this. Maybe you should try another store." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. He'd heard stories, read the complaints, but experiencing it firsthand was different. The dismissive tone, the way she looked at him like he was wasting her time, it was all too familiar. "Do you treat all your customers like this?" Marcus asked, his voice steady but firm. Sarah crossed her arms. "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just doing my job." Marcus took a deep breath, his heart pounding. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his ID badge, the one with his name and title in bold letters. "Actually, you're not, and as the CEO of this company, I expect better." Sarah's eyes widened, her face turning pale. I didn't know. I'm sorry." But Marcus wasn't done. "Sorry doesn't fix this. Do you have any idea how many people walk into this store and get treated the same way? How many people leave feeling like they don't matter?" The store had gone quiet. Customers and employees alike were staring, some whispering, others pulling out their phones. Marcus didn't care. He'd spent years building this company, fighting for every inch of success, and now he was seeing the cracks in the foundation. He turned to leave, but not before saying one last thing. "This isn't over, not by a long shot." As he walked out, the weight of the moment settled on his shoulders. He'd gone undercover to see the truth, and now he had to figure out what to do with it. But one thing was clear. Things were about to change. The video spread like wildfire. By the time Marcus got back to his office, his phone was buzzing nonstop. News outlets, social media, even his own employees were talking about it. The clip was short, but damning. Sarah's dismissive tone, Marcus's calm but cutting response, and the moment he revealed his identity. The caption read, "CEO catches employee in racist act. What happens next?" Marcus leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen. He hadn't planned for this. Going undercover was supposed to be a quiet experiment, a way to see the truth without causing a scene. But now, the whole world was watching. His assistant, Lisa, knocked on the door. "The board's online one. They want to talk." Marcus sighed and picked up the phone. The board members didn't waste time. "Marcus, this is a PR nightmare," one of them said. "You need to fire that employee and issue a statement. Fast." "Firing her won't solve the problem," Marcus replied. "This isn't just about one employee. It's about the culture we've allowed to grow in our stores. Be that as it may, the public wants action. If we don't handle this quickly, it could hurt the company. Marcus clenched his jaw. He knew they were right, but it didn't sit well with him. Firing Sarah might calm the public, but it wouldn't change anything. It would just be another Band-Aid on a wound that needed surgery. After the call, Marcus decided to visit the store again. This time, he went as himself. The moment he walked in, the atmosphere was tense. Employees avoided eye contact, and customers whispered as he passed. Sarah wasn't there. She'd been suspended pending an investigation, but her absence didn't make things any easier. Marcus called a meeting with the staff. They gathered in the break room, nervous and unsure of what to expect. "I know you've all seen the video," Marcus began, "and I know some of you are wondering what's going to happen next. Let me be clear. This isn't just about Sarah. This is about all of us. The way we treat each other, the way we treat our customers, it matters. And right now, we're failing." He paused, letting the words sink in. "I'm not here to point fingers or make anyone feel guilty, but I am here to make changes. Starting today, we're going to have mandatory training on racism and diversity. We're going to have open conversations about what's happening in our stores and how we can do better. And we're going to hold each other accountable." The room was silent. Some employees nodded, while others looked uncomfortable. Marcus knew it wouldn't be easy, but he also knew it was necessary. As he left the store, his phone buzzed again. It was a text from an unknown number. "You think you're making a difference, but you're just making things worse. Watch your back." Marcus stared at the screen, his stomach tightening. He'd expected backlash, but this felt personal. Whoever sent this message knew how to get under his skin. He didn't have time to dwell on it. The protests outside the store were growing louder, and the media was camped out front, waiting for a statement. Marcus knew he had to address the public, but he also knew it had to be more than just words. Back at his office, he sat down to write his speech. He wanted to be honest, to acknowledge the company's failures while also offering a way forward. But as he typed, his mind kept going back to the text. Who sent it? And what did they want? The questions lingered as he finished the speech. He didn't have all the answers, but he knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning. The press conference was set for noon, and the room was packed. Reporters lined the walls, cameras ready, while protesters outside chanted slogans that echoed through the building. Marcus stood backstage, going over his speech one last time. Lisa handed him a bottle of water and gave him a reassuring nod. "You've got this," she said. Marcus took a deep breath and stepped out into the spotlight. The room fell silent as he approached the podium. "Thank you all for being here," he began. "I know there's been a lot of talk about what happened at one of our stores, and I want to address it directly. What you saw in that video was unacceptable. It was a failure, not just by one employee, but by our company as a whole. And for that, I take full responsibility." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. But responsibility isn't just about admitting mistakes, it's about taking action to fix them. That's why, starting today, we're implementing a company-wide initiative to address racism and discrimination. This includes mandatory training, diversity workshops, and an open forum for employees to share their experiences. We're also creating a task force to ensure these changes are meaningful and lasting. The room erupted with questions, but Marcus held up a hand. "I'll take a few questions, but first, I want to say this. Racism isn't just a black problem or a white problem. It's everyone's problem, and it's up to all of us to solve it." The first reporter stood up. "Mr. Johnson, will the employee in the video be fired?" Marcus hesitated. "That's still under review. What I can say is that we're committed to giving everyone the opportunity to learn and grow, but accountability is non-negotiable." Another reporter asked, "How do you respond to critics who say this is just damage control?" "This isn't about damage control," Marcus replied firmly. "This is about doing what's right. I built this company from the ground up, and I won't let it become a place where anyone feels less than equal." As the questions continued, Marcus noticed a man in the back of the room. He was tall, with a stern expression, and he wasn't holding a camera or a notepad. When their eyes met, the man gave a slight nod before turning to leave. Marcus tried to shake off the unease, but it lingered. Who was that man? And why did he feel like he'd seen him before? After the press conference, Marcus returned to his office. Lisa handed him a stack of messages, but one stood out, a handwritten note with no return address. You think you're untouchable, but you're not. Stop now, or you'll regret it. Marcus's heart raced. This wasn't just a random threat. Someone was watching him, waiting for him to slip up. He called Lisa back in. I need you to find out everything you can about the employee in the video, Sarah, her background, her connections, anything that might explain why this is happening. Lisa nodded. I'll get right on it. As she left, Marcus sat down, his mind racing. He'd gone undercover to expose racism, but now he was the one feeling exposed. The threats, the mysterious man at the press conference, the tension in the air, it all felt connected. But how? That evening, Marcus decided to visit Sarah. She'd been suspended, but he needed to hear her side of the story. When he arrived at her apartment, she looked surprised to see him. Can I come in? He asked. She hesitated but stepped aside. The apartment was small and cluttered, with photos of family and friends on the walls. Sarah sat on the couch, her arms crossed. I'm not here to yell at you, Marcus said. I just want to understand. Sarah looked down. I already told you I'm sorry. What else do you want? I want to know why, Marcus said. Why did you treat me that way? Was it because of my race or was it something else? Sarah sighed. I don't know. I guess I just didn't think. I was stressed, and you were just another customer. I didn't mean to. But you did, Marcus interrupted. And that's the problem. You didn't think. You didn't see me as a person. And that's what we need to change. Sarah didn't respond, but Marcus could see the guilt in her eyes. He stood to leave, but before he did, he said one last thing. You have a choice, Sarah. You can stay stuck in the past, or you can learn from this and be better. The decision is yours. As he walked out, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. The threats, the tension, the unanswered questions, it all felt like pieces of a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. But one thing was clear. Whoever was behind this wasn't going to stop. And neither was he. The next morning, Marcus arrived at his office to find Lisa waiting for him. She looked tense, holding a folder in her hands. I did some digging on Sarah, she said, handing him the folder. You're not going to like what I found. Marcus opened the folder and scanned the documents. Sarah's background was more complicated than he'd expected. She'd grown up in a small, racially divided town, where tensions between communities ran high. Her father had been a vocal supporter of a local group known for its extremist views, and Sarah had been active in online forums that promoted similar ideologies. But what caught Marcus's attention was a recent photo. Sarah standing with a man Marcus recognized. It was the same man he'd seen at the press conference. Who is this? Marcus asked, pointing to the man. His name is Greg Harris, Lisa replied. He's a former employee. He was fired a few months ago for making racist comments to a coworker. According to the records, he and Sarah were close. Marcus's stomach dropped. This wasn't just about Sarah. Greg had a grudge against the company, and now it seemed like he was using Sarah to get back at Marcus. We need to find Greg, Marcus said. If he's behind the threats, we need to stop him before this escalates. Lisa nodded. I'll get security on it right away. As Lisa left, Marcus's phone buzzed. It was another text from the unknown number. You're playing with fire, Johnson. Back off, or you'll get burned. Marcus clenched his fists. He wasn't going to back down. Not now. Later that day, Marcus received a call from the store manager. You need to come down here, the manager said. There's something you need to see. When Marcus arrived, the manager led him to the break room. On the wall was a series of graffiti messages. Know your place, we're watching, and this isn't over. Marcus's blood ran cold. This wasn't just a threat, it was a warning. "We've already called the police," the manager said. "But I thought you should see this." Marcus nodded, his mind racing. Whoever was behind this wasn't just targeting him, they were targeting his company, his employees, everything he'd worked for. That evening, Marcus decided to confront Sarah again. He needed answers, and she was the only link to Greg. When he arrived at her apartment, she looked even more nervous than before. "I know about Greg," Marcus said, cutting straight to the point. "I know he's been influencing you, and I know he's behind the threats." Sarah's eyes widened. "I didn't know he'd go this far," she said, her voice trembling. He said we needed to stand up for ourselves. He said you were trying to destroy us." "Destroy you?" Marcus asked, incredulous. "I'm trying to make things better, for everyone." Sarah looked down, tears in her eyes. "I didn't want any of this. I didn't know what to do." Marcus sighed. "You can still make this right, Sarah. Help me stop Greg before someone gets hurt." Sarah hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, I'll help you." With Sarah's cooperation, Marcus and the police were able to track Greg down. He was arrested that night, but not before a tense confrontation at his apartment. "You think you've won?" Greg sneered as the police led him away. "This isn't over, Johnson. You can't change the world." Marcus didn't respond. He knew Greg was wrong. Change wasn't easy and it wasn't quick, but it was possible. The next day, Marcus held another press conference. This time, he stood with Sarah by his side. "This has been a difficult time for all of us," Marcus said. "But it's also been a wake-up call. We've seen the worst of what racism can do, but we've also seen the best of what people can do when they come together. Sarah has shown incredible courage in standing up for what's right, and I'm proud to have her as part of our team." The room erupted in applause, but Marcus knew the work was far from over. The graffiti, the threats, the arrests, they were just symptoms of a deeper problem, and solving that problem would take more than just speeches and training. As Marcus left the podium, he felt a sense of determination. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but he was ready to face it, because change wasn't just possible, it was necessary. The days that followed were a whirlwind. The media coverage shifted from outrage to cautious optimism, as Marcus's company became a symbol of accountability and change. The Diversity Task Force was launched, with Sarah playing an active role. She'd become a vocal advocate for the training programs, sharing her own story of ignorance and growth. It wasn't easy. Some employees were skeptical and others resisted the changes, but Marcus remained steadfast. One evening, as Marcus was wrapping up at the office, Lisa walked in with a stack of reports. "The numbers are in," she said, placing them on his desk. "Customer complaints are down and employee satisfaction is up. It's working." Marcus smiled, but his mind was elsewhere. The threats had stopped after Greg's arrest, but the experience had left him on edge. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to uncover. "What about Greg?" Marcus asked. "Has he said anything?" Lisa shook her head. "He's not talking, but the police found evidence linking him to other extremist groups. This wasn't just about you. It was part of something bigger." Marcus leaned back in his chair, processing the information. Greg's arrest had exposed a network of hate, but it was just the tip of the iceberg. There were others out there, people who believed in the same toxic ideologies, and they weren't going to disappear overnight. "We need to stay vigilant," Marcus said. "This isn't over." Lisa nodded. "We will. But for now, we've taken a big step forward. You should be proud of that." Marcus knew she was right, but pride wasn't enough. He wanted to do more, not just for his company, but for the community. A few days later, Marcus announced a new initiative, a scholarship program for students from underserved communities. The program would provide financial support, mentorship, and internships at his company. It was his way of giving back, of creating opportunities for the next generation. The announcement was met with widespread praise, but not everyone was happy. At the press conference, a reporter asked, "Isn't this just a publicity stunt? How can you guarantee this will make a real difference? Marcus didn't flinch. This isn't about publicity, it's about action. I've seen firsthand how systemic racism can hold people back, and I'm committed to breaking that cycle. This program is just the beginning. As he left the stage, Marcus felt a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. The road ahead was still uncertain, but he knew he was moving in the right direction. That night, Marcus received a call from an old friend, David, who'd been following the news. "You've done something incredible," David said, "but you can't do it alone. Racism isn't just one man's fight, it's everyone's." Marcus agreed. He knew real change would take more than just his efforts. It would take a collective effort, from individuals, companies, and communities. The next morning, Marcus stood in front of his employees, ready to address them one last time before the new initiatives rolled out. "This isn't the end," he said. "It's the beginning. We've made progress, but there's still so much work to do, and I need all of you to be a part of it. Together, we can create a company and a world where everyone is treated with respect and dignity." The room erupted in applause, but Marcus's mind was already on the next steps. He knew the fight against racism wasn't a sprint, it was a marathon, and he was ready to run it. As he left the room, Marcus felt a sense of hope. The journey had been painful, but it had also been transformative. He'd faced his own doubts, confronted the ugliness of hate, and emerged stronger for it. And he knew, no matter what challenges lay ahead, he wouldn't back down. Because change wasn't just possible, it was inevitable.